Hi, this is Max Miller, co host of the Fair Fight podcast. Just wanted to let you know that the audio you are about to hear was originally recorded on March 6, 2026. We hope that you enjoy the show, even though it deals with some pretty weighty subjects. And remember that you can always give us a call at 920 We Fight. That's 920 933 4448. Or you can send us a question at ask at thefairfightpod.com. We would love to hear from you, so please, if you have any questions or want to leave us a comment, reach out to us and let us know. And now, enjoy the show. Well, good morning, Alvaro, and welcome everyone to a special Friday live version of the Fair Fight podcast. I'm Max Miller, an antitrust attorney, a corporate skeptic, and with me, as always, is former FTC Commissioner Alvaro Bedoya.
Good to
Alvaro,
see you.
how
Good
you
morning,
doing
Max.
this week?
I'm okay. It is a heavy week. It
Yeah.
is a lot of things happening, but mostly this war, which I'll talk about momentarily. Usually, I've got something about how my kids are headed out to school, or some business like that, or how my dog has made a nice big mess in the morning.
It's
But
hard. It's hard
today,
to
today is not
focus.
one of those days. Yeah,
It's hard to focus on just everyday life things
yeah,
when, we have corruption going on, we have people dying around the world
yeah.
because of America's actions, and, family events just seem to take a back seat to all of this drama.
Yeah, it's certainly hard to think about the lighthearted stuff, but we did have some good stuff happen this week. Do you want to
Yeah, well,
talk us through that?
I thought it would be good just to take a few minutes here in the beginning and talk through some of the developments this week. I mean, gosh, big news items. I mean, Kristi Noem is out as the Department of Homeland Security. You'd love to believe that that's going to change the way that ICE has been operating and all that, but putting what's his name in Oklahoma, DeMark
Mark
Wayne,
Wayne Mullen,
Mark
Senator
Mark
Mark
Wayne
Wayne Mullen.
Mullen, yeah, which, it's funny. I saw the photo circulating of him during the January 6th invasion, ducking behind a chair.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. I don't know about that critique that he was that he I've I someone's
well, but
trying
you
to
also
kill me,
remember,
you know.
you remember when Sean O'Brien, like, was testifying
I do
before the
I do
Senate
remember that.
committee.
That
Like,
that I think
but that's, and
was
look, I
was
I just I have a
fantastic.
problem. I have a problem with, like, faux manhood, right?
Mm,
Which is just this, like, kind of like, I'm a big tough guy, dare you challenge me,
yeah.
because, like, to me, the real toughness comes from, like, having principles, living by morality, and having,
Amen.
like, good. But
Amen.
that's so anyway, that was a big news with Noam. But what I wanted to talk about was that
Yeah.
we had a primary in the state of
Yes.
Texas, and just
Yes.
there's some phenomenal indications that this economic populist message has an ability to reach
Yes.
rural America in a way that the Dems just seem so reticent to
Yeah.
pursue this, right?
Yeah.
They seem so, like, against the idea of us taking on corporate power. But when we have candidates who do that, such as Graham Plattner up in Maine, such as Tallarico in Texas, it seems to be appealing to voters. And Tallarico, and not just the fact that Tallarico won against
Representative Jasmine Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett, who it seemed that the Democratic establishment was pushing, to try to get her to win. But the turnout in Texas was the largest it's ever been for the Democrats. And the Democrats actually outpaced the Republicans. And they had a contested primary with, Cornyn and what's his name? Former AG.
Ken Paxton.
Ken Paxton. Yeah.
I don't think he's
That was
former. I think he's current, right?
Oh, current AG. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
just keep thinking that he
No,
was
no.
impeached, but, he was impeached, just not removed from office. Or
Oh, learning
uh,
learning those distinctions.
that's right. But anyway, yeah, so that was big news, but then yesterday,
Well, could we talk
one
for
of
a
our
second about Tallarico?
absolutely.
So, what I think is remarkable is I do think the wind is starting to shift
Yeah.
because for so long, Democrats did not want to take concentrated corporate power on. And some folks who you might not expect to take on corporate power are doing so and are just flying that flag unabashedly. Tallarico my understanding, wasn't really known as someone who was an economic populist in the Texas State Senate. I could be wrong about this. I did not track his career, but among the folks that we know Max, that we're friends with, we're colleagues with, he kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And what you heard from him was honestly the message you hear at the top of our show every live and in these recorded episodes that we're taping in the background, which is this isn't about left and right. It's not about your neighbor being wrong, your neighbor being your enemy. It's about the money at the top hurting all of us underneath. So he did that thing. And the second thing he did was talk about positivity, and he had a
Yeah.
hopeful message. Honestly, very similar in his own sort of Texan, former middle school teacher, pastor way as Zohran Mamdani, I would say. You know, Zohran, Mayor Mamdani did it in his own way, you know, with those videos he posted, many of which were completely hilarious. Tallarico did it in honestly, a bit more of a Barack Obama cadence.
I think so.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
That's a good comparison, actually. It just
yeah,
like kind of that straightforward talking to people. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. And I think it really connected with people. Obviously, the hilarious decision by CBS to make Colbert not broadcast him, pushing
Yeah.
Colbert into putting him on YouTube
Well,
instead.
you know what the Streisand effect is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but you should
Yeah, and
explain what
it's
it
like
is.
it's well, so, I forget the gentleman's name who coined this phrase or whatever, but it all relates
Yeah.
back to an attempt by, I think, Barbara Streisand to, like, suppress a video or something that was piece of information that was embarrassing,
I
and
think
of
it was a
course it
photo of
went.
her home, of like a
Yeah,
multi-million-dollar home, and she sued.
but the idea of the Streisand effect is that the more that you try to suppress something, the more that you try to be draconian in
Yep.
stopping it from getting out, actually it finds a way of becoming more popular and people have
Yeah.
more access to it because of your attempt to stop it. So anyway, that seems to be what happened with the Tallarico interview situation. The FCC sent very strong message to CBS that they would take action if Tallarico was able to appear.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert kind of called their bluff and was like, "Well, I can release it on YouTube," and he
Yeah.
did. And
Yeah.
it had far more viewership than it would have if it had just gone out live on
Yeah.
TV. Mhm. So,
So go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I
Well,
was gonna
I
talk about
wanted
what happened yesterday.
well, but before yesterday, I did
Yeah.
wanna talk about Tallarico because you said that
Yeah.
he's doing it in this very peaceful way,
Yeah.
but I think that for those on the progressive left who are, like, trying to take on corporate power, trying to do it, there does need to be a little bit of, like, a call to action too, and I don't know if you saw his acceptance speech, but he talked about Jesus flipping tables at the temple,
Yeah.
and
I
he
didn't
talked
see it.
about
I
how.
heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think this is important is that it's like, well, we can all hold hands and say we're together, right? We're in together in this fight against the oligarchy. Like there has to be action. And, and I think that imagery of like the peaceful Jesus who wanted everybody to come together, but flipped tables at the temple where the money changers,
Yeah.
had taken over, basically corrupted the church,
Yeah.
right? His church. A little bit of action is necessary to make that message really take hold.
It is funny how so many of these figures that we revere for their kindness and their heart, from Jesus Christ to Martin Luther King,
Yeah,
we forget how, in their time, radical they were. How Martin Luther King was speaking out towards the end of his life about capitalism and how it was crushing regular people, and how the ideology of the letter from Birmingham jail was quite radical.
yeah.
And I think it's valuable to hear someone like Tallarico talk about that.
Well, and also even when you take like MLK and
Yeah,
the message of nonviolence, like he understood that there was a component of nonviolence which actually had violence as part of it. I don't know if you
the
remember, what
flipping of
was
the
it, the
tables.
Selma? Well, no, no, not
Yeah.
the flipping of the Selma March, right?
Yeah.
That was it that he put there were chil it was a conscious decision made to put kids at the front
Oh, I didn't know
of the
this.
march. Yeah, because it's like but he knew that it was like that image of the because he knew that the police were gonna be violent, that they were
Yeah.
gonna use water hoses, that they he's like he knew that what they were doing was going to attract violence from, the police, and it was that, he knew that that imagery of violence was what would shift people's opinion.
Wow.
So even
I didn't know that
Gandhi, I think,
story.
had similar ideas of nonviolence that
Hmm.
it's you basically bring out the violence of the other side, right?
Mm.
Like, and you understand that that's a consequence that you face for
Of
being
turning the other
nonviolent.
cheek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, so anyway, but let's move on to what happened yesterday, which in
Yeah.
antitrust terms was significant, huge, that, Senator Schumer announced proposed legislation to break up the meat packing plants. And just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the concentration in meat packing. We talked about the meat packers' desire to import cattle into the United States to further suppress the price paid to America's cattlemen. And here now, the Democrats have actually put forward a bill to break up the meat packers. And this is something we haven't seen since, I don't know, the New Deal era, like actually propose legislation to restructure an industry.
So this is a big deal. And full disclosure, I spoke at that press conference. I, in the past and to this day, have some serious issues with Senator Schumer and some of the positions he's taken. For example,
You and me
in
both, sir.
egging on this president into the first bombing of Iran, saying you're going to taco. But I do have to say, it's a huge deal for someone like Senator Schumer to be out in front saying break them up. And for those of you who don't track meatpacking and what's happened there, what's basically happened there is that we have gone back to the past, back to the days of the beef trust, where ranchers in the days of the beef trust had only one place to sell their cattle. And unsurprisingly, when you have one place to sell your cattle, the price they give is the price you get, and you start to go bankrupt. Now, again, one of the first visits I did as a commissioner was thanks to you, Max, in a little hotel outside Des Moines with a room full of corn growers and cattlemen who said, yeah, I only have one place to sell my cattle. It's so far away that my cattle die in the heat of the drive. That when that one place closes during COVID, I have to euthanize a warehouse full of cattle and hire high school kids to dig holes to put that cattle in. And who were talking about going bankrupt. We had grown men and women breaking down in front of us talking about this. And so, what Senator Schumer, Senator Booker, Senator Welch, who spoke really powerfully, really movingly, someone who's deeply familiar with the dairy industry in Vermont, grew up with it as a steward of it, talking about not just forcing these companies apart, saying, hey, if you have a dominant position in pork, you can't have a dominant position in chicken or beef. And hey, if you have a regional monopoly, not just national monopoly, if you have a regional monopoly, we're going to have to break that up. That is a big deal because we're used to folks, and Senator Gallego was there. He's been terrific on this stuff, but we haven't heard this kind of message from Senator Schumer, and I think it's a big deal that Senator Schumer is doing this in the run up to the midterms. He understands that when you have one place buying cattle, it doesn't just screw over the rancher who used to get 70 cents off every buck you spend at the grocery store on beef. Now they get 30 cents. It doesn't just screw over the producer, it also screws over the consumer because you have middlemen raking in these profits that could be passed on as lower beef prices for ground beef for consumers. I'm pretty sure you're the same way, Max. You're a dad, you're a mom. Ground beef is a staple. And some of the prices on ground beef are completely bananas. And so to have someone like Senator Schumer saying, not something like, well, we're going to start policing this industry once we're in charge, just saying flat out break them up. And to have, I think, 12 Democrats on there. Again, this is a message that Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, Senator Gallego had been putting out there. We now have folks like Senator Booker, Senator Schumer out there saying the same thing. And especially with Schumer, this is a really big deal. And
Well,
so
and it
I'm
seemed like
happy to see it.
yeah, and part of the message, it seemed, was about the foreign ownership too. which,
Yes.
I think Americans have to be aware of. Like,
Yes.
when I first started looking into the beef industry, years ago,
Yeah.
I was shocked to find out how much Brazilian companies control America's beef industry.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think we have because the
Yeah.
biggest news, as far as I'm concerned, this week was the fact that we seemingly without any provocation started bombing Iran.
Yeah.
We attacked along with Israel. We attacked Iran. And Khamenei was killed in one of the first strikes. There has a bit of a power vacuum now in Iran, and there seems to be no end in sight to this. There have been effects to the oil markets as the Strait of Hormuz, is it pronounced Hormuz, has been essentially closed. 20% of the world's oil moves through that strait. Um, this is insanity, Alvaro. And I wondered, can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening in Iran?
So let's first talk about the human cost to this. We have had at least six American service members killed. I think
Some of them
possibly
based in Des Moines, where I'm
based in
from.
Des Moines, where Max is speaking to us from right now. You had a 20-year-old kid studying IT, whole life ahead of him. You had a mother of two who's never coming home to her kids. You had a little girls' school in Iran bombed. Israel has denied it, and the United States is "quote unquote" investigating it, which tells you that almost certainly it was the United States who bombed that little girl's school. The U.S. and Israel point out it was next to an Iranian Republican Guard base, but uh, this is a horror. This is a horror. Dads and moms in Iran love their daughters as much as I love my daughter, as much as any mom or dad in the U.S. loves their daughters. It's a war crime, and more importantly than it being a war crime, it is a horror. It is immoral. It is wrong. There is no reason we should be losing American life or killing little girls in Iran when our government already supposedly bombed Iran's nuclear program out of existence. You had Iran
On the
and
on the day of the bombing, they still had up a announcement on the White House website that the nuclear capabilities of Iran had been obliterated.
yeah, you have not just the service members, not just these girls were getting killed. You have people across the Middle East being killed, and again, yeah, this is after not just the Americans said Iran's nuclear program had been obliterated. You had the Iranians, so the supreme leader of Iran, Khomeini, had issued a fatwa against nuclear programs. They had reiterated, "We have no plan to have nuclear weapons." Oman, the mediator, had said, "These guys are serious, right? They're ready to commit to no nuclear weapons, and we bomb them anyways." And so, we have American service members who've been killed. More will be killed, um, needlessly. This is not the first, not the second, not the third, but the fourth Middle Eastern war of my lifetime and yours, Max. It is insanity. It is immoral. It is very difficult to see so many Democrats out there denouncing it or not denouncing it, saying they kind of don't like it because the right boxes weren't checked in their briefings, in the votes they took, issuing 16-paragraph, essays about their complex feelings about the war. No, this war is immoral. It is wrong. It's going to result in a lot of Americans being killed,
It's
and
unpopular.
it is unpopular, but it
The
is
Americans
yes,
do not
yeah,
want this.
that's right. And so that is the human cost. That is the most important cost and the one that people need to sit with. There's also a financial cost, which is very, very real. You have by now two sets of estimates about how much this war is costing us each day. You have Nancy Youssef, a well respected reporter, saying that the Pentagon says it is $1 billion a day. You have the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimating that in the first 100 hours, the war cost $3.7 billion. And those may seem like similar estimates, but they're actually slightly different. So Nancy Youssef, her estimate, according to Sagar and Jetty, of breaking points, which everyone should be watching right now, um, pointed out in last night's broadcast or yesterday's broadcast that that does not include, the replacement cost of the munitions that are being fired. THAAD interceptors, which we'll talk about at length today, are $15 million a pop. We fired off, according to CSIS, 24 of those in the first 4 days of the war. And supposedly some insane Kuwaiti pilot shot down not one, not two, but three F-15EXs, which cost $103 million a pop. And so right there, you have roughly $300 million in munitions being spent in the first 4 days of the war, and another $300 million in destroyed aircraft in the first 4 days of the war. And so either Nancy Youssef's estimate of $1 billion a day is very, very low, or CSIS produced roughly $1 billion a day, including those replacement costs. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that that number is correct. Okay? We are now in day 7 of this war. This began last Friday night, American time. If this war continues for another 3 weeks, and that is what Secretary of quote unquote war, Pete Hegseth, is saying, that's what President Trump is now saying, that's going to be roughly $30 million. And that, my friends, is the cost
Did you say
of
$30
billion dollars.
billion?
Forgive me.
Yeah, I just want to.
This thing is 30 days, according to what I'm pretty sure is a conservative estimate. That is $30 billion in American taxpayer money. Guess how much the ACA subsidies, the healthcare subsidies that were supposedly way too expensive last year, cost per year?
We can't afford to help people.
Can't afford it because it's $30 billion. Me and you, Max, have had the experience of going to meet with people and talk about how their kids are going to school hungry in South Dakota. Guess how much it would cost to feed every single American kid lunch for free every day?
How much,
$30
Alvaro?
billion. So this war goes on a month. We could have paid for those insane healthcare bills that people are getting from insurance companies that supposedly we could never pay. This thing goes on for another month, and we could be feeding little kids every single day for free their lunch. And now some people might be saying, oh, well, not all the kids are hungry, right? Some of them have parents like you, Alvaro, like Max, who can afford to feed them lunch. You know what, guys? You see the same insane tax breaks going to billionaires as I do. You see the same insane $0 tax bills from these Fortune 10, Fortune 20 companies. You know what? I could use not spending, several $100s a month, making my kids lunch, right? I'm perfectly comfortable with them getting free lunch at school, right? And I think a lot of people who make a lot less than I do, it would be a huge help for them every single day to not have that expense. And this is all stuff we say we cannot afford.
And that, like, I mean, look, I hate to kind of bring economics into this because it's like these are just moral choices. Do we
Yes.
spend money on a missile
Yes. Right.
that kills people, or
Right.
do we spend money on a kid eating lunch?
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, even if you're talking about middle class or even upper class people
Yeah.
having their lunch covered for free, well, that's money that they can spend on something else.
On something else.
To
Yes.
support a small business in their
Yep.
local community,
Yep.
to invest in a new startup business. That's like all of that money is fungible. And so it's like if the
On
government takes
childcare, which costs a
on ch-
gazillion dollars. That's right. Yeah, you have. So I am struck, and we're going to talk about who profits from this insane
yes,
war. But
because that's
one thing I really sit with is how the basics of day to day are not built for being a working parent, right?
no.
Like school, but school starts at like 9:15 and lets out at like 3:30. The workday goes from 9 to 5. And so every parent, if you have two parents working, you got to cover those 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock hours, right? So everyone is childcare. And so if you're giving kids free school lunch, that makes childcare a little bit easier. Yeah.
But can we also talk about look, I don't know if you know this, but I sit on my kids, the school district, their policy committee,
I didn't know that.
so so I like, just we revise policies on a, semi or, every couple years policies get looked at and there's a committee of parents to just last night I had a meeting and they were talking about debt collection from parents for school fees and for lunch and like that, and these
Lunch debt.
policies that
Yep.
and I'm like I won't give the number, just, I mean, it's public information, but, it's amazing to me how much parents actually now pay for public school. Like, just the fees and everything associated with it, like, that not everybody can afford that.
Yeah.
We're making education unaffordable,
Yeah.
and yet we're spending $30 billion a month
Yeah.
to bomb a country that all the evidence points to was not an immediate threat
Yeah.
to either the United States or Israel. I mean, I've seen those have you seen those videos of Netanyahu talking about Iran's imminent threat
Yes, for
going
the
back
last
to, like,
30 to
the
40
for the
years.
last 30 years, Iran's
Yeah.
just, 2 weeks away from making a nuclear weapon, and it's like and I just am so angry.
Yeah.
And but why, Alvaro? Why, when Americans don't want this, when this doesn't serve the United States interests, when, why is it? Why is it that we are now at war without a declaration of war from Congress? Why is it that we are at war with a
Yeah.
country and bombing school children
Yeah.
in Tehran?
Well, look, there's a lot of answers for this, and part of this is this president's warmongering, but part of it is the fact this is big business and
Yeah,
people are making money from it. And so we just talked about the cost of this war, the human cost, the economic costs, but there's also profit in it. And not just a little profit, a whole lot of profit. So let's start with oil and gas and focus on LNG, liquid national gas.
okay,
The United States is now a huge exporter of LNG. Who else is a huge exporter of LNG? Qatar. Qatar sends tons of LNG through the Straits of Hormuz to Asia, to major allies of ours like Japan, like Korea. And now those nations are struggling to try to fill their LNG needs from Australia. And guess who else? The United States. And so maybe we can throw on, we have two of the three top exporters of LNG here in the United States in the form of a company called Cheniere, which has grown explosively in the last 10 years, and another company called Venture Global. Here is what has happened to the stocks of Cheniere and Venture
alright.
Global.
Can you see that, Alvaro?
I can, yes. And
Okay,
so what you're seeing right now is year to date, the stock price of Cheniere Energy. Benjamin Netanyahu started talking about a second strike in Iran right at the end of December. And you can see what's happened to that stock price. Let's see what's happened to the stock price of Venture Global. This is another American company, I think the fastest growing American LNG company opposite Cheniere.
okay. Alright, here is Venture Global. Is it sharing?
That's quite an arc of a stock price. And as you'll see, right around that February 27th date, this thing skyrockets. And sure enough, we have reporting from the New York Times where those companies say, and I'm grateful to Claire Brown for this reporting. These companies say we are well positioned to fill this need, but there's a wrinkle here that we do have to talk about, which is that these are not just any natural gas companies. These companies are major supporters of this president, Donald J. Trump. Many of you will remember in 2024, there was a moment in the campaign in the summer when President Trump had a dinner in Mar-a-Lago with oil and natural gas executives. And he did something which I know it's really hard to be outraged, but is just bananas. He said to them, I need not $1 million, not $10 billion, not $100 million, not $500 million. I need $1 billion. Will you please give me $1 billion? And guess who was at that dinner? And maybe you can throw up the Politico coverage of that dinner. Guess who
I
was
will
at that dinner,
try.
Max? We had the chief executive, according to the New York Times, of U.S. natural gas exporter Venture Global LNG, and you had the CEO, a Mr. Fusco, Mr. Jack Fusco of Cheniere Energy. Cheniere Energy donated $250,000 to a Trump-affiliated PAC in 2024, and Venture Global LNG, again, my understanding, the fastest growing American LNG company, donated $1 million to President Trump's inauguration, according to the Wall Street Journal. So I don't want to say, like, I think one of the things that happens with people like me and you who talk about this is it's easy because the stuff is so outrageous for this to become some kind of caricature. Oh, Trump did this to enrich his oil and gas executives. And I don't think it's that simple. But what I do know is that when you make a hard decision, if you have powerful people who are texting you, who are still slapping you on the back saying, "Hey, man, we got you. Hey, man, we understand." That makes a really big difference. And what you see is that these major backers of this president, Donald Trump, are going to profit hand over fist from the energy shock that's going to come from this war that we're already seeing from this war.
Can can I point out too, it's not just Trump. You know, yesterday so there was a war powers resolution that was proposed in the House. 4 Democrats
Yeah, no, it's bananas.
switched
It's
over
bananas.
to vote against the war powers
Right.
resolution. Do you know how many Democrats were needed to flip over in order to defeat the
No, I don't
resolution?
actually.
4.
Oh my lord. Is
If
that
those
right?
4 had voted for the resolution, it would have passed 2016 or
Yeah.
216 to 215,
Yeah.
right? But they switched over in order to ensure its defeat.
Wow.
And and uh,
And
and
yeah.
and here's the deal: is
Yeah.
Jeffries going to do anything about this, Alvaro? Like, is he going to take DNC funding away from
Right.
those for doing it? No, because this was orchestrated by the Democratic Party.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, absolutely, and it's
I
because
don't know,
those
man.
same companies that greased Trump's
Huh.
palm, for his campaigns, they make sure that, certain Democrats stay in power too.
Hmm.
And so the fix is in.
Yeah.
It's in because there are people who profit off of the death and destruction of not only the United States, but the world.
So
And
there's
and
a go
they're
ahead.
they're
Yeah.
that profit means more than morality.
Yeah.
It means more than principles, and it sure as hell means more than the Democratic Party because they're willing to sell out this country in order to make their donors rich.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
I don't
I'm angry this
Oh,
morning.
you should be angry. You should be angry. And I don't know why they voted the way they did. I do know that what their vote was completely immoral.
It's too cute.
I
It's
also
too
know that
cute that it's just the right
yeah.
amount, and
I
and
also
that
know that
Jeffries is doing nothing, doing
that I will
nothing.
agree with you on that Hakeem Jeffries is weak, and I do not understand how he is still the leader of the Democrats in the House. It completely baffles me.
Well, because the right oil companies give him money, probably.
So let's talk about who gets this money, though, because this
Yeah.
week there was a new paper out from Professor Isabella Weber
Yeah,
and Professor Gregor
she's
Semenyuk,
great.
who are at the University of Massachusetts, because they
Can
went in.
Before
Go
we
ahead.
get into the paper, can we
Yeah,
just talk a little bit about Isabella Weber? Because she
please
has
go ahead.
been, well, no, she's just been an excellent progressive economist out there. Look, I rail against economists all the time,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like,
wouldn't know from your
I
online presence,
know.
Max. Yeah,
I just, I mean, the thing that bothers me about it is it isn't a scientific field, right?
yeah,
There's just too much, that they can play with to make conclusions and all
yeah,
of that. But there are a few economists out there who I feel like they are trying to pursue the best policy for,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
And Weber is one of them. She has just been fantastic talking about price controls.
yeah,
Economists say just categorically, they say price controls never work. It always raises, the price of everything and blah, 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 blah. And it never works. It
yeah,
never works. And she presents all the data and evidence that shows that actually done in the right way, it can lower the costs for everybody and
Yeah.
actually increase profits and do all these things
Yeah.
that the economists say never happen. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanna point out that
No,
she's
that's
doing
great.
great work, and I
Yeah,
I love her scholarship. Mhm.
absolutely. And so she and Professor Semeniuk went in and looked at the last big energy shock, which was
Yeah.
around the war in Ukraine. And they tracked the profits from that war, which came in the form of um, increases in profits from certain businesses, which came in increases in stock price of certain businesses. And they tracked down to the tenth of a percent where those profits flowed in the American population. And so maybe you could throw up, I think it was A6, the key graphic from the Weber
Yeah,
and Semeniuk
A6. Here we
paper.
go.
And it's going to be a little overwhelming at first, but I really think people need to sit with this because while people paid more at the gas pump and paid and just shoulder that burden, certain people were seeing their stock portfolios explode, seeing the value of the companies they own explode. And what they figured out, Max, was if you look at this graph, if you look at the upper right hand corner of the graph, they figured out that there's roughly 360 billion with a B dollars in profits flowing from this energy shock caused by the Ukraine war. Of those 360 billion dollars, the top 0.1%, 0.1%, the top, 1 in 1,000 people in this country got $92 billion. The remaining part of that 1%, the zero point 0.9 of the 1%, got another $98 billion. And when Professor Semeniuk and Professor Weber added these things up, it meant that the top 1% of the American population captured 50% of the profits from this energy shock. They made 190, the top one out of 100 people in this country, made in total across all of those 1 in 100 people, $190 billion. And this bar graph at the bottom makes the same point, right? Dark purple is top 0.1%. They see a quarter of the profits of this war. The remaining 0.9%, that poor, bottom 0.9% of the top 1%, um, makes enough so that over half of the profits of this war are flowing into the 1%. And this is enough money, they point out, to outpace the impact of inflation on these people's livelihoods. It is enough for them to make money, right? And so when you see another energy shock like the one that is occurring
Well,
right now, go
Alvaro,
ahead.
it's a wealth transfer too.
Yes.
Right,
Yes. Say more about that.
well, when you think about what these profits are, it's like it's the higher amount that average Americans are paying at the gas pump,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's their wealth, it's the average American's wealth being transferred to the upper 1/10 of 1%, the
Yeah.
upper 1%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I stop sharing this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. um, so we have a situation where nobody wants war like this, right? I don't think Americans in general are just categorically opposed to war, right? But it's like we certainly need to have a reason to go to war. And if you remember on one of these previous lives, I've talked about Dwight D. Eisenhower and the military industrial complex, right? Like he warned, and
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Eisenhower,
Yeah. Hard not to respect them.
oh my gosh, what he did in the European theater, it was funny, my yeah, I guess it was Patton, not Eisenhower. My grandmother's boyfriend after my grandpa died, he actually, like, drove Jeeps in World War II, and, like, he would drive I think he did drive Eisenhower around at one point in
Oh,
time, but
wow.
it was mostly he was like Patton's personal driver,
Oh,
which was
wow.
kind of yeah, but anyway, but Eisenhower saw the horrors of war.
Yeah.
He saw what World War II did to Europe, to the populations of Europe, and to America too, costs and all that. And he warned about the idea of having an economic system that becomes dependent upon the profiteering of war. And he said, you're going to get, if you allow kind of private corporations to profit off of war, you're going to get more war because they're like, and there's a Texas country singer named Blaze Foley that he passed
I
away in
mean,
the
he's not just any
1980s.
Texas country singer. He is,
One,
as you have taught
I
me, one of the
I
greats.
introduced Alvaro to Blaze Foley.
Yeah.
He's good. But he wrote a
I'm
song all
going
about
down to the railroad station, gonna get a
gonna
ticket
get a
to
ticket to ride.
ride.
Yeah. Anyway, you'll have to anybody listening that doesn't know
It's a much
Texas
happier
country.
song than, well, actually,
They
kind of dark song, kind of sad song, kind of bittersweet song.
well,
Good song to listen to in a day like this.
he's got a song that's called World War III.
Oh,
Which is all about this, which is basically it's like, "Hey, we haven't been to war in a while, and, we gotta go. We gotta send these young people off to die, and, like, nothing fun on TV anymore. Let's get a war." But it's essentially what we're dealing with the military industrial complex
yeah,
that you have these and do you mind if I throw up,
please.
a chart about, defense contractor consolidation? And this is really fascinating to me because this chart, just so everybody knows, comes from a 2002 report. So I hit the okay. Is that coming through?
Yeah,
Let
you
me
should
let me mess with
expand it
the
out.
yeah. Let me mess with the expansion here to. I don't know if it's going to
Oh,
be. I
wow.
guess yeah, but the consolidation. I'm going to do both of us here so that we can see this. The consolidation over a 20-year period. And I know the whole chart can't be seen there, but you're talking about 4 did I lose it? Alright,
No, it's
this
still up
is
there, bud.
alright. So you've got now Lockheed Martin,
Oh my
Boeing,
gosh.
Raytheon, which now is, I think, RTX is what it trades as,
Okay.
Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics that and perhaps, Alvaro, I think you've talked about this before, The Last Supper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should talk about what it is.
Well, if you think about when you look on the left side of that chart and all of those different companies that were competing for defense contracts, right? And they were being propped up by government spending, that was during the Cold War. And look, the Cold War was extraordinarily profitable for a lot of companies in the United States. But after the fall of the Soviet Union in, what was that, 1991, um, you basically had government funding cease for all of these Cold War products that were being churned out by these companies. And so there was it 93? I think it was.
1993, yeah.
Yeah. A meeting led by the government basically to say, hey, look, we're not going to be able to support your industry anymore because the funding's just not going to be there. And of course, that led then to this massive amount of consolidation. And so this goes back what I was talking about with Eisenhower in the military industrial complex. You have, and I'm going to use some vulgar language here, right? You have companies that are sucking off the tit of the government, right? They don't have a market for their services unless there is a war. And in order for them to keep churning profits, in order for them to keep satisfying shareholders' desire for profits, they have to manufacture war. And I think that's what we're seeing in the United States now. I mean, quite frankly, I'm such a cynic. I'd say that, we were seeing it in the early 2000s, with the invasion of Iraq, with, it's these constant military actions around the world, right? That's all just profit margin to these companies.
So why don't you throw up the stock price of the one which I think it makes sense to focus on
Yeah.
today,
I
which
wondered
is
if we were gonna go
Lockheed
back to
Martin.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so Lockheed Martin is the manufacturer of the THAAD missile interceptor system. And these are interceptor missiles, which cost somewhere in the ballpark of 12 and $15 million. And what you see in terms of Lockheed Martin is the result of that consolidation, where you have a company that's created that, by seemingly all accounts, is the opposite of efficient. It
Yeah.
is bloated. It is slow. It is not responding quickly to the needs of the American government, at least, stipulating whatever those needs are, right? I think that those are moral choices that we've talked about here. This is not a company that's tripping over itself to innovate. And so when the THAAD missile interceptor system was first initiated, I think authorized back in 2000, it took Lockheed Martin not one, not two, not three, but 5 years to test a prototype. And then you have a report from the Government Accountability Office and subsequently Bloomberg pointing out that in 2016, the company was looking at an order of 48 THAAD missile interceptors. It was only able to produce somewhere around 21. And the reason was that one of their subcontractors had an issue. And so as a result of that brittle supply chain, because everything is consolidated, right? All production just ceased for 4 months. And so, you know, now someone might be saying, Alvaro, you don't know anything about defense contractors. And you'd be right, but I do know how to read
Do
numbers,
yeah.
and I do know what numbers mean. And so when you look at the profits of this company, it is very obvious that this company could be taking those profits and putting them back into its systems, its development, to make them more efficient, make them more nimble, make them better, or make those missiles cheaper. And they've been making $5 billion to $6 billion a year in profit. And that, for me, looks like the definition of a bloated defense contractor that
Well,
is not responding nimbly to the needs of the American defense system.
can we talk about one of the peculiarities of defense contracting,
Go
which
ahead.
of course
Oh, the single
was
source.
well, I was going to talk about cost plus. Um,
Oh,
if
no.
you're
Go ahead.
familiar
Talk
with
about that.
this.
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. So, and this was cooked up. This was cooked up by the same oligarchy people
Hmm.
who got rid of antitrust law, the same, Epstein class, I'll call it, that they came up with, hey, you know what? In order for us to ensure that we have defense contractors, right? What the government needs to do is not like bid and actually like make sure that they compete against each other, but like, we need to have contracts that essentially reward them for whatever they produce to the government.
Mm,
So not that it's like here's the competitive price, for our product, but essentially you agree that whatever our costs are, you're going to add like profit on top of that,
hmm.
right? So essentially we just have to report to you what our costs are to produce something,
Yeah.
and then you'll add a profit margin on top of that to us.
Yeah.
So it's called cost plus. You can look it up. There's lots of literature on it. Um, look, I'm not an economist, but I also understand numbers, and I understand that if you have no incentive to drive costs down, you won't.
Right.
You
Right.
won't drive those costs down. You won't compete against competitors because you just tell them, "Hey, it cost me $1 billion to make this. Now give me 1.5 billion for it." And
And
then
we've
next
gone,
time it
yeah.
costs me 1.5 billion and you give me 2 billion for it.
And we've gone from a market of 51 different defense contractors to 5.
Yep.
And so you don't need to be an expert in defense contracting to be familiar with what a market of 4 or 5 companies looked like. That's the market for smartphone, cell phone
Yep.
contracts. It used to be 4, now I guess it's 3, right? Everyone knows what it's like to sit on hold with Verizon, right, or T-Mobile or AT&T, and that is what we're seeing here. And
Hmm.
sadly, the tragic example of this is what's happening to American service members right now in the face of these Shahed drones. So Iran manufactures these not terribly sophisticated drones, right? I don't think they can maneuver. I think it's basically like a straight shot. They don't move very fast. I think it's like 120 miles an hour, and which for a projectile is not very fast. But they make them for somewhere around $50,000 a pop. And what people need to understand about this tragedy of these 6 American service members who died is that they were in, my understanding is, like a triple wide trailer that was defended like we defended stuff in the last Iraq war and in the war against ISIS, which was it had concrete barriers around it to prevent against IEDs and basically a truck bomb being driven in. And what it did not countenance is what every single one of us has been seeing in the war in Ukraine, where Iran has been arming Russia with these same Shahid drones. And you will find horrible videos on the internet from the drone's perspective killing Ukrainian soldiers. And there's also videos on the internet of Ukrainian drones killing Russian soldiers. Nowadays, death comes from the air in these cheaply mass manufactured drones. And
Well,
what is
and
quickly coming out,
people in cities across the Middle East are finding that out too,
yes,
because these
Americans
attacks are
across
being
the Middle East, that's right. These
well,
drones are hitting hotels and high rises across across the Middle East, where a lot of American service members have been really strangely moved, where a lot of Americans live, where a lot of just regular people live in these countries. And what is quickly becoming clear is that our defense industry doesn't really have an answer to it right now. And what it certainly looks like is that these
which is
defense
phenomenal
contractors,
considering how long the Ukraine war has been
it's been
going on.
4 years. And what it certainly looks like is that these defense contractors have just been plodding along, producing their $15 million a pop or more interceptors, right, that are designed to intercept these ballistic missiles, right, streaming through the air, and you're going up against a $50,000 drone, right, that this country seemingly can mass produce. And so I hope I am wrong about what certainly looks to be happening here, but that is what it looks like, is that we have a defense industry that has not met this moment. And I think part of that is because of how few of them there are, how much money is flowing into them, how profitable
Without
they are
consequence.
without
How much
consequence.
the
That's right.
money is flowing to them
That's right.
regardless if they do a good job, if they keep costs down, they just get to cash that paycheck at the end of the day, no matter what. Mhm.
Yeah. So that is where I think we are. And
But
go ahead.
oh, go finish your thought.
No, I think we should maybe touch upon some of the weird stuff happening with AI here.
That's
But
exactly where I wanted to go,
go, go, go, go, please.
especially talking about drones, right? And
Yeah,
drone technology, because 'cause we're not just talking about, like, death coming from the air.
yeah,
We're starting to talk about death coming from a computer.
yeah,
When you're creating these types of weapons that are unmanned drones that are able to go into a populated area and do strikes, and, you know, I in an ideal world, a human being is still making the decision as to whether or not a strike happens, right? Um, Not to wax philosophical, right? But I always think about the, Cold War and all the different nuclear threats that we had, right? And have you heard this story about this one Russian guy, I forget his name, that maybe saved the world from nuclear catastrophe?
yeah, 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 yeah,
That it
yeah,
was like that basically the Russian systems were malfunctioning and saying that they were under attack. He was skeptical about it. He basically double checked it. His orders were that he was supposed to fire the response, right? But he hesitated because he knew that there was a stronger possibility of like a malfunction,
yeah,
right, than of there actually being an attack. And he was right, and he saved probably countless lives around the world because he didn't do his duty. Um, Now replace that man with an AI program, and what happens to the world? Mhm.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk not about this whole Anthropic versus ChatGPT dynamic.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, let's talk about it briefly, but I want to talk about what I think is the bigger thing because I think this Anthropic versus ChatGPT dynamic is a little bit of a red herring. But in a nutshell, it seems pretty clear that the American military used Claude, which is the product made by Anthropic, to sift through lots of data for the Maduro kidnapping and seizure of the Venezuelan president and quote unquote extradition. Although
Yep.
they just got the guy, killed a bunch of people, and brought him to the U.S. So it seems like Anthropic was used, and at a certain point, Anthropic's head, Dario Amodei, said, "Look, we refuse to have our product used in these systems where there's no human in the loop and there is automated killing of people." And so Pete Hegseth got all worked up about it and said, "No, we draw a red line." And Anthropic was effectively, and I don't know the current status of this because my understanding is that their products are still being used in the Defense Department, but
I think Trump did he made a statement that they're banned, and then they used it.
and then they kept on using it. But of course, there's some positive press going to Anthropic, and then Sam Altman.
Which is good.
Sure, it's good that Anthropic said that, but I don't think we should over-index on them quote unquote drawing this line because there's something much bigger happening here, which is that these AIs are being used to produce target packages
Yeah,
for the air forces of first Israel and then the US. I just put in the chat, Max. I don't know if there's a way to throw it
I
up on the
can try.
screen. This is a piece of reporting from 972 magazine that occurred during the war in Gaza. And this is a well-respected magazine that basically did some original reporting around the fact that the Israeli military was using an AI that was called Lavender to produce target packages to bomb Gaza. And so, what basically happened at a certain point in Gaza, it seems, is that the known targets that the Israeli military had, and this is one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world, they just started running out of targets. And so what happened is they apparently, according to 972 magazine, started feeding some of this information into an AI, which would just produce target packages that the Israeli military would then, according to them, to the military, all right, then basically sign off on and say, okay, good to go. Go ahead, right? And so we now have and you can pull that down now, a
Yeah.
very similar situation with the US and Israel and Iran. Because something came out very recently that in this fog of war isn't getting much attention, which is that Pete Hegseth has said that the amount of ordnance we have already dropped on Iran is more than 2003 shock and awe during George W. Bush. This is 7 days into this conflict. We have already dropped more ordnance on this nation of 90 million with its capital of 10 million people. And so, what has almost certainly happened, Max, is that they are using AIs to produce target packages. And yesterday, you had Dr. Trita Parsi point out something very curious, which was that this square had been bombed in Iran that, and I'm just throwing this one in the chat as well, maybe you can throw it up as well,
Try here.
had no apparent military value. It was just a square, just a park in the middle of Iran. Okay? And turns out, though, that the park was called Police Park. And so what Dr. Trita Parsi, who this is a well-respected international expert on Iran, on the various geopolitical conflicts and tensions around Iran. So he asserts that this was an Israeli bombing of Police Park, and he is putting forward the idea that they bombed this because it was called Police Park. And so what I am deathly concerned about is that the American military may be doing the same thing, maybe using these AIs to produce target packages because, again, shock and awe was one of the one of the heaviest bombardments in American military history, concentrated bombardments. We have already surpassed that. I hope that humans produced it because but I don't know, and I strongly suspect they didn't. And I want to point something out because people are going to be saying, "Oh, Alvaro, I'm sure that there was a human who approved any target package from the U.S." Because Dr. Parsi's saying he doesn't think the Israeli Air Force did that. He just thinks that AIs are putting them up and the Air Force is dropping bombs. I want to put to everyone that there's something called automation bias. This is
Absolutely.
something that I studied for many years in the context of the use of face recognition technology by the police. It is a very natural human thing that when there's a human telling you do XYZ and there's a computer telling you do ABC, we are much more likely to believe ABC just because it's a computer. And so if the American military is using Anthropic, Claude is using ChatGPT, OpenAI, I do not care. If they're using these AIs to produce target packages, I think everyone needs to understand it is much more likely that we have targets being put up that have nothing to do with the Iranian military, that are facilitating carpet bombing under a veneer of process and under a veneer of targeting. And if we are working so closely with the Israeli military that, again, repeated public reporting has suggested is using these AIs both to produce the packages and allegedly to produce it without human oversight. I fear this is where we are today. And if not, this is where we're headed.
And Alvaro, can we just talk about I'm sorry, like I'm always a dystopian in my view. I love sci-fi
Yeah.
because sci-fi considers kind of the moral, ethical questions of these things, long before. And this one's not really a sci-fi film, but have you ever seen Captain America: Winter Soldier?
I don't do any of the Marvel or
That's okay. That's
I don't
okay.
do
I'm
any of
sure
them.
some
Yeah.
of our listeners have
Right.
seen this one, but I saw that movie, and it was about the only one in the Marvel, universe that I was like, that's a pretty good film." Um, because it dealt with the concept of targeting of potential threats.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and, you know, it I can't remember the whole plot, but essentially there's this, evil organization or whatever that Captain America, fights against, and it had basically infiltrated, military systems for years and developed an algorithm to decide who is potentially a threat to its power and then automated taking them out, these potential threats.
Yeah.
And that's, I think Westworld dealt with, like, kind of a similar concept, but the idea that we have the technology to just sift through threats and potential threats and then automate the destruction,
Right.
we're talking about countless innocent people who get caught up in that, dragnet because they said the wrong thing online, because this is we're seeing it's like an authoritarian wet dream. Right? To have the power to just automate removal of enemies. And, everyone should be disgusted with what we're seeing in Iran. We should have been disgusted with what we were seeing in Gaza, with how the Israeli military was indiscriminately just
With our
taking,
dollars.
with our
Me and you
dollars.
paid for that, Max. Everyone
That was kids'
listening in the
free
US.
lunches were going to commit
Yeah.
genocide in Gaza,
Healthcare. Healthcare.
all of our
Yeah.
healthcare. And we have to be horrified, not we should be horrified it's happening to other people, but we should also be thinking about how it's gonna be turned on us.
Yeah.
When you have this technology and you have this ability to take out anybody you don't like, when the government has that power, like, I mean, this is what conservatives have talked about for years,
Yeah.
right? Is that we should be afraid of our government having the power to harm us in this way. And anyway, I'm scared. I'm angry. We gotta keep fighting though, Alvaro, because if there's one thing about these people in charge of this government right now, not only are they obviously have ill intent, but they're also kind of incompetent.
Yeah,
And
well,
we need to take
also they
advantage of
didn't.
that. We need to take advantage of that incompetence while we still can. Mhm.
Well, look, let's talk about the Democrats first.
Yeah,
The fact is, a lot of these folks weren't built for street fights, as it were. They weren't built for a scenario where you got a little bully pulpit, right? You may not be able to get stuff passed, but you just got to be scrappy. You got to fight. You got to find allies, and you just got to go. And
Ro Khanna's doing
I
pretty
was
good with it.
literally about to say his name. Ro Khanna is right at the top of his list, this list in terms of his scrappiness.
And thanks for Massey on the
Amen. No, I mean
Republican
it
side
is. These
too.
are profiles in courage. These are
Yeah.
profiles in courage, and we need to press our lawmakers to oppose this stuff. So one thing that happened yesterday was that all these Democrats went out and voted, to with the War Powers resolution, put forward by Tim Kaine, and then right afterwards, there was a talk of a $50 billion plus up to the defense budget because this thing is costing minimum $1 billion a day. And a bunch of Democrats immediately, so I think it was Politico, started calling around and being like, all right, guys, well, are you going to be for this? I mean, you're against the war. Are you for money? And all these Democrats are like, oh, well, yeah, I think I'm going to pay for it. But very
Slotkin
quickly,
was like, "We're in it."
some Democrats changed their position when they said they would vote for it. And immediately there was an outcry and people flipped on it, right?
Did Slotkin walk that statement
No, I don't
back?
think Slotkin walked it back,
Okay.
but like pressure from the public works. Calling your senator and congressman works. Even better is showing up in their offices and saying,
Yeah.
I do not want this war. There's something really curious happening right now among Republicans, which is quick polling out the gate showed that 3 in 4 Americans do not want this. Now there's a significant degree of rally around the flag effects, and I have friends, in Nebraska, for example, who are saying, actually, now that the war at the
I
very
didn't know you
start of
had
this,
friends in Nebraska.
I do. At the very start of this, people are against it, but now that the president's for it, they're saying they're for it, right? So there's that rally around the flag effect. But I know that there are Republicans, and there's a hell of a lot of independents who are against this war. Call your senator, call your congressman, tell them that. Because the curious thing that happened is that this war powers vote was effectively party line. You had Rand Paul and Fetterman switching positions. But
Yeah.
other than that, you had people like uh, um, Collins from Maine and Murkowski from Alaska. Collins, who's about to go down in flames in the face of Graham Plattner, voting to authorize
We
this war.
we hope. We hope. Mhm.
Uh, uh,
They're
uh,
stirring up. They're stirring up trans issues in Maine to try to counter.
Graham Plattner had a
He
great
dealt with
answer to
that.
that. He said, "Look, I wrestled,
Just
20 years ago. I was on the wrestling team. I wrestled with girls. I was in the football team. There were girls on the football team. Like, no one cared.
and he
There's
and
no
he
reason."
correctly says
Right.
this is a distraction from the
Yes,
economic
that's
problems
right.
that are being forced upon you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, folks, we Max and I hope to be giving you concrete advice on how you can take action here. Truly picking up the phone, calling your senator, calling your congressman, showing up at their offices, right? Is what you need to do to oppose this war. Give them the reason to have that street fight. Give them the reason to stick out against the flow if they're on the Republican side, because what's tragically going to happen is more people like the reservists out of Des Moines, Iowa, are going to
Yeah.
get killed. More little girls and little boys and women and men, innocents across the Middle East, are going to be killed in Iran, in the UAE, and all these other countries. These are just people like you and me are going to get killed. And now is the time to act about it. So,
That's
Max, why don't
beautiful.
we wrap
That's
there?
I mean, no,
Yeah,
that's beautifully said. And we're at a point in time we don't have the luxury to stay silent.
yeah.
We don't have the luxury to hope that somebody else will step up. It's incumbent on each of us to do our part and fight against this flow.
Yeah. So, Max, to everyone listening, we have a couple great updates.
Yeah.
We are up in Spotify and Apple, and of course, still YouTube. And so,
I'll
please
I'll
take a
try to
moment.
have this episode will hopefully be up on Spotify and Apple by the end of the day.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So please take a moment to follow and subscribe us on those platforms. I get to say for the first time ever, 5-star reviews, please. It
5
is a huge
star.
help in promoting the show. And in the background, folks, we are cutting pilot episodes around Q&A. A lot, folks who are familiar with the show say we talk about it as being inspired by car talk for the messed up economy.
Yeah.
And so up next, we're going to be recording an episode with the one, the only Cory Doctorow, the coiner of the term enshittification, where seemingly everything tech related, everything internet related starts off shiny, amazing, and new, and ends up as a big pile of ish. So if you have questions
And
as to
shitification is kind of just our current culture and our current
yes,
life too.
yes, and
It's
so if you have questions about that, send them to ask@thefairfightpod.com. You can call them into 920 we fight. You could also leave a
Hey,
go ahead.
let's stay on the call here for a second, because guys, I man the voicemail box. I'm lonely. Give me a call. Give us a call. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us your thoughts on these like live episodes that we do. Ask questions. Give us ideas for future episodes. Just give us a call. This is kind of, it's funny. Amanda and I were talking about this. Like, you know, I'm a big Sturgill Simpson fan,
I have
and
no idea who that is.
oh my god, dude. Johnny Blue
Sturgill
Skies.
Simpson?
Sturgill Simpson is a country music artist. You would love him. The guy is amazing. He's just releasing this disco country album.
Oh,
Yeah,
I would
he's
like
like,
to listen to that.
oh, you should check it out, especially, sorry for the language, folks, but, he's got a song that's like, "I wanna make America fuck again. I wanna make America learn to love again."
Oh, wow.
It's like yeah, so he's just this, rough and tumble country singer, but, he's not releasing it on digital media. He's
Oh,
only
wow.
releasing it in hard form, and so it's like that's like it's like something that's, unique, right?
Yeah.
I feel like our phone number is that. Right,
All right.
how
OG,
many podcasts gives you a phone number to call
not
into?
many.
You can complain to us, you can call me an idiot, whatever you wanna do. Just give us a call, leave us a message, and maybe you'll make a show.
And so please leave us a call, give us a message about Cory Doctorow. Your questions for Cory Doctorow, anything that's on voice will get first priority. But even if you don't do voice, shoot us a note,
Yeah.
leave a comment, reply to the posts that are about to go up. And apparently, in addition to Steve Earle and Zach Brown Band, I now have to
You
listen to
gotta
someone named
Sturgill
Sturgill Simpson.
Simpson.
All right.
Man, you gotta. The song "The Promise" from the '80s, like,
Oh, yeah. Ba, ba, ba,
oh,
ba, 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 ba,
yeah,
ba.
yeah,
Yeah,
"I'm
yeah.
trying not
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to"
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
that one.
Anyway, he did a cover of that. It's
Really?
amazing. Oh, it's
Oh, that sounds
amazing.
amazing.
You look up Sturgill Simpson, "The Promise,"
All
and
right.
your life will be changed.
All right, my friend. Have a great day. Everyone
You
listening,
too,
have a
sir.
great day. Thank you for tuning in. We will catch you probably next Friday, 8:45
Next Friday, we're
Eastern,
gonna try to do this weekly now,
7:45 Central.
folks.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.